Imagine reaching into an old jacket and pulling out a crisp 500 rupee note you forgot was there. It feels great. Now imagine reaching into that same pocket, expecting to find the 500 rupees you placed there this morning, and grasping empty air. In both scenarios, your net worth has changed by exactly 500 rupees. The absolute math is identical, but the sting of losing that note hurts significantly more than the joy of finding it. For decades, economic theory struggled to account for this. The prevailing model, expected utility theory, operated on the assumption that humans evaluate choices logically, based entirely on their final asset states. By that logic, a 500 rupee gain and a 500 rupee loss should carry the exact same emotional weight. In 1979, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published prospect theory. They proved through behavioral testing that the brain doesn't calculate risk like a spreadsheet. We systematically overweight certain outcomes, and we evaluate money not by its absolute value, but by how it makes us feel relative to our current position. This asymmetry in our psychology is highly predictable. By mapping exactly how we deviate from standard economic models, businesses can build strategies that target our perception rather than our wallets. To understand how this works, we have to look at the 0 point. Kahneman and Tversky found that we don't judge our wealth in total absolute terms. Instead, our brains establish a neutral baseline, a reference point, and we code everything that happens to us simply as a gain or a loss relative to that moving target. We can see this mapped out directly on Kahneman and Tversky's value function graph. The horizontal axis represents the actual objective amount of money gained or lost, while the vertical axis represents the subjective psychological value, how good or bad it feels. If you look at the lower left quadrant, you'll notice a severe asymmetry. The curve plunging downward into negative territory is much steeper than the curve rising into the positive. This illustrates loss aversion. Mathematically, losing 100 rupees drops your psychological value roughly twice as fast as gaining 100 rupees raises it. As we move further out along the horizontal axis, the curve flattens out in both directions. The first 1,000 rupees you lose hits you incredibly hard. The next 1,000 hurts a bit less. This diminishing sensitivity means the heaviest psychological weight is concentrated right around the reference point. Because all value is judged against that center line, the absolute price of a product actually matters very little. If a company can successfully move your internal zero line, they dictate exactly how you perceive every option in the market. Before 2016, the Indian telecommunications market operated on a strict baseline. You paid a premium monthly fee, and in exchange, you received a limited amount of data. Every consumer internalized this exchange as the neutral reference point. Then Reliance Jio, led by Mukesh Ambani, entered the market. They offered an unlimited 4G data plan, and they made it entirely free for the first 6 months. Jio provided enough time for consumers to internalize this new abundance. By providing months of unlimited access, they repositioned the daily experience of 300 million users. 0 rupees for infinite data became the new reference point. With the internal zero line anchored at free, the prospect of going back to the old model triggered intense loss aversion. Handing money to Vodafone or Airtel to get a fraction of the data was no longer a standard transaction. It was a direct hit to the consumer's perceived wealth. This psychological shift upended the industry's traditional profit models. By targeting the reference point rather than competing on price alone, Jio made paying for a standard utility feel like an unnecessary cost, forcing competitors into a period of rapid consolidation and revenue collapse. This mechanism operates in the background of nearly every modern digital product. The free trials and default opt-ins you encounter daily are designed to calibrate your reference point. When a software company pitches a premium tier, they rarely focus on what you gain. They highlight what you stand to lose if you downgrade. The intense pain of losing a feature drives far more action than the pleasure of acquiring a brand new one. A 30-day free trial allows you to internalize ownership of a service. By day 30, your baseline has shifted. Canceling the trial forces you to move from your new neutral state into a perceived loss, and your brain strongly resists taking that hit. This horizontal timeline shows how anchoring works in negotiations. If one side sets an extremely high initial price, that number becomes the anchor. It forces the central reference line to recenter. The opposing party then perceives any downward compromise as a painful loss. Winning a market rarely comes from just building a better product. The companies that capture entire industries do so by resetting the board. They shift the customer's baseline so effectively that choosing the competition feels like a financial loss you simply can't afford.